As IT capabilities in cloud computing, endpoint devices, and hybrid work structures evolve, cybersecurity architecture needs to evolve with them to secure government data and the workforce everywhere agencies operate. At the same time, threat actors are growing more specialized and sophisticated in their attacks, which requires an increasingly proactive posture from agencies. I'm Wyatt Cash with Scoop News Group, and here to talk about how agencies are modernizing their security architectures and implementing new capabilities, including automation, to address those threats are Stephen Hernandez, Chief Information Security Officer at the Department of Education, and Felipe Fernandez, Chief Technology Officer at Fortinet Federal. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Stephen, I'd like to start with you, if I may. How is automation shaping your ability to respond to cyber threats more effectively? And at the same time, how is automation enabling the threat actors that you have to guard against?
You know, what an powerful question. And I think I'll start with the latter part first, because our attackers are using automation in incredible ways. And, you know, our threat actors used to be all about, they were highly skilled, highly motivated, often backed by nation states. They would build custom tools, they would deploy them. We live in a wildly different world now. Now there are marketplaces for automated attacks where, frankly, very low level and unsophisticated attackers can rent services and rent times to automate attacks against, for example, federal departments and agencies. And so it's really caused us to shift and think about, our attackers are using these technologies, our attackers are using automation and orchestration. We obviously need to do that just to keep up, but there's other opportunities as well we should be considering. And when we think about it from the timeline perspective, we're thinking about, you know, phishing as a service. What are we doing about that? And the good news is we already have a lot of automation in our portfolio already. We have security orchestration, automation, and response, which is really taking the actions in the SOC, our security operations center, and automating them. You know, taking 80% of the load off the human and letting the machine do that work and letting the humans make those critical decisions in the 20%. But remember, that's what we call to the right of boom. That's after something bad has happened. What we really want to focus on is, like, you know, if you're a Star Trek fan, how do we modularize the shields or modulate the shields so that we're constantly evolving the defenses so things don't get through in the first place? And when we think about this, I always think about what our Deputy National Security Advisor, Ann Neuberger, talks about. She says, imposed costs and impose consequences. And every time we make it harder for an attacker to get in, and we're able to respond faster to their attack and shut them down and turn that information to partners like in the FBI, we're doing just that. We're going to impose costs in the difficulty of getting into our environments. And we're going to impose consequences, better data for investigations, eventually bringing them to justice. And automation is going to be the heart of how we're going to be able to do this at speed and at scale.
So, Felipe, how do you see threat actors upping their use of automation, and what must agencies do to keep ahead of that?
Yeah, so you know, along the lines of what Stephen mentioned, there's some marketplaces. There's now, you know, it's a profitable business model for cyber criminals to utilize these tools in an automated fashion and deliver them to whoever wants to use them at any target. And as we've learned from, you know, the Colonial Pipeline attack, you know, that can turn out to be a very quick profit. You know, in a matter of 2 days, they secured themselves, they thought, you know, close to $4 million. Now, luckily, the FBI was able to recover some of that for that organization. But as you can tell, not all organizations are gonna be that successful. And number one, you know, being able to prevent the attack from spreading further and causing further damages, and they may be more inclined to pay right away before, you know, help or federal agencies are able to gather some forensics and, you know, try to recover this stuff. So the other part is the advancement of AI and allowing, you know, again, really low education cyber criminals, you know, low experience cyber criminals to get into the game. You know, we can talk about large language models and all the popular ones, but, you know, I think it's really interesting that code can write code. And while we can scoff at it as you know, technologists right now, as that's really low quality code, but, you know, the truth is, you know, right now and forever, the code is learning how to write better code. So at some point, this is going to be really efficient and effective. And I think, cyber criminals are going to continue to advance the ball there. So what's really important for federal agencies and all organizations is we continue to, take a look at, what threat vectors are out there, what are, what are potential vectors that can be, used against us in terms of what our assets are, how can we lower that footprint, the available footprint for attacks, and do that in an automated fashion. So, we talk about automation from a post-breach perspective a lot, but what about automation in absorbing and in trying to bring in threat intelligence feeds, so that way we can modularize the shields, if you will, in a manner that's effective into what today's threats are, based on what we know about our exposure today as an organization, and changing our shields, if you will, changing our protections, making sure that we have appropriate protections in place to thwart these kinds of attacks. So not just post breach, but using automation, from let's say a vulnerability management perspective and assessment perspective would be really important.
Well, I think listening to both of you, what that also points to is the need for a more holistic view of your entire IT environment. Stephen, back to you. What approaches are you taking at the Department of Education, for example, to achieve a more holistic view of your IT environment and be able to also respond to threats more quickly when you see them?
Yeah, fantastic follow on, Wyatt, because we can't have what we just talked about without having this necessary discussion, which is the so what. How are we going to leverage this and use it? And in my department and agency, we're looking at 150 or so different service providers all in the mix when it comes to how we deliver services to our citizens and to my department. And so it's really becomes, you boil it down, what's the foundational ask? It's really around risk visibility. And it's about how do we get parity of that risk visibility across, in my case, all approximately 150 providers, so that I can go to bed and sleep at night knowing that I have the same visibility in provider A as I do B. But you know what? There's a lot of complexity in that space, because some of these are software as a service providers, some of them are infrastructure, some of them are platforms, some are combinations. And so one of the things we're really focused on is understanding how do we get good telemetry in these different scenarios that then we can bring together, we can normalize to know, what does normal behavior look like? What does abnormal behavior look like? How does a SaaS compare to an infrastructure in terms of what behavior I should be concerned with? And the more complex attacks we see, they're targeting all levels, and they're doing it concurrently and sometimes asynchronously to see if they can catch one piece of the pie out of coordination with the other. And when they can, and they find that asynchronous moment, that's when they'll plug in and start moving laterally or vertically in the environment. So, particularly when we look at the White House and what they've asked us to do in the President's Cybersecurity Executive Order, there's a memorandum 21-31 that came out of OMB that really talks about expectations around data. And I say data, the memo is actually talking about logging and the ability for law enforcement to use these logs. But that becomes an incredibly powerful level set across all these different environments, because if I can start to get consistent information about what's happening in the environments via logs, I'm able to get them in some type of centralized visibility platform, maybe a cyber data lake, a lake house, or some way of a federated environment. I can start to coordinate and piece together what's happening across these multiple environments and be able to, as Felipe was pointing out, understand that threat a little bit better. And the more I can understand about that threat, their motivation, their means, and the opportunities I might be providing them to attack me, the faster I can SWAT them, because I can close those gaps, I can defang their tools, and I can send them packing somewhere else. And what the real potential here is, especially with automation, like in Zero Trust, we talk about the ability to have the policy engine or the trust engine that's going to use automation to help accelerate this process. It's reducing the time to detect, which necessarily leads to reduced time to mitigate. And that's our goal here.
Well, just to follow on that also demands a cohesive data strategy, right? So talk to us a little about how you go about working with your colleagues to achieve a more cohesive data strategy to help improve your ability to see what's going on in all those log files, if you will, and to, again, identify cyber threats more effectively.
You know what, you may have a career in OMB cyber because in the recent ZTA memo, the Zero Trust memo, there was a call to bring together the Chief Information Security Officer Council and the Chief Data Officer Council to tackle this exact space. One of the things we're working on right now together is a product that looks at what's all of our existing data categorization and classification models. How are we already marking the data we have? And how can we leverage that with our automation and tools to start thinking about how do we start putting preventative measures in front of our most sensitive data or data that we think is being targeted? And the work that we're doing there is going to expand into that space. What it really drives towards though is this idea of master data management, or really understanding the data we have, not only the crown jewels that we're protecting, the data that we're entrusted to hold, but also all this rich data we're getting from the tools. And so, one of the beautiful things about Zero Trust is we are awash in a sea of cybersecurity data, particularly behavioral data about, the users of our systems, the attackers, the systems themselves, and how they're behaving. We need our CDO partners at the table to make sure that we're going to understand that data, use sound data science to make rapid and sound decisions, which then is going to lead to a better proactive posture for my entire environment.
So, Felipe, how do you see a cohesive data strategy actually making a difference, specifically when it comes to improving the ability to respond to cyber threats more effectively?
Yeah, I think it really is underscored by agencies looking for, more homogenous, infrastructure to help out with this. One of the things that, can get lost by a shiny object, new SaaS tool, or any tool that's out there to help you out with your zero trust strategy is you're now going to have to understand or create a strategy to understand the data and the telemetry that's going to come from that tool. And the more disparate tools that you purchase or acquire and consume, you expand or extrapolate rather that challenge throughout your entire organization and incorporating that, normalizing it. And how do you actually take advantage of that data if you're just keep putting that off? So, one of the things that, we're seeing is, particularly in the various departments, and they address it differently. Obviously, Department of Defense has a more holistic strategy. They have, one organization that's, helping out, that's providing services to others. But we're also seeing agencies leveraging services from DOJ as well, using other types of vehicles where, some type of platform has been adopted to take data that they have already addressed the normalization of and helping out with that. Even the whole SOC as a service offering is really important to help this out as well. So what I really love, what I'm seeing from federal agencies they are helping each other out. No one is in this alone. They're not trying to normalize data from disparate tools that they're consuming only for their agency. They're trying to leverage the work of others and the expertise of others. And as vendor partners, I can say us and others have been doing a really honest, good job of helping them out and really understanding where, okay, what are your gaps in terms of where you are and what are the tools you have today? How can we help you fill that gap in an efficient and quick manner as possible? And I really see that happening. I think it's really helping our agencies out, and they're really advancing the ball in this area much quicker than what could have been anticipated where we were 10 years ago even.
Well, and then finally, in the brief time we have left, and this is a question for both of you, in what other ways can automation help agencies not only defend their most important information assets, but also make them more resilient in the future? Stephen, let me ask you to take that one first, please.
Yeah, what a great question, because as cybersecurity professionals and risk professionals, we spend so much time talking about protecting confidentiality. But our lives at the pinnacle are really about three things: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And when we talk about resilience, we're really talking about that availability piece. And oftentimes, this gets overshadowed by confidentiality, but automation can play an incredible role in making sure that our systems are resilient. And this is a conversation we have all the time with our lines of business, because they love to remind me, CISO, it's great that you're protecting our information, but if our students can't get to the information in the ways they need to, it really doesn't matter at the end of the day. Duly noted. So we're going to make sure that whatever we're doing in the security space provides that resilience. And when we think about automation, particularly with the power of the cloud, we have so much capability now that wasn't there even 2 to 3 years ago. We have ability to automatically transfer workloads between not only the same cloud provider, but sometimes multiple cloud providers, to ensure that if one has an issue, another's going to step in and make it happen. But some old tried and true principles come into play here. You still need to test this stuff. Test that contingency plan, test that DR plan. Go send somebody into one of your data centers. If you still have them, pull the plug. Real time action, and see if you truly have resilience. Our friends in the commercial sector over at Netflix, they have tools like Chaos Monkey. They turn loose, that's designed to consistently test that resilience. We can do the same thing in the government with the capabilities we have now. Touching a little bit on data and automation, at my department, we've had some amazing success there, particularly in automatically going through and understanding what do we have for data holdings, particularly in terms of what we like to think of as data toxicity. This is data that is aged. It's probably beyond its useful life. We have no legal or business reason that we should hang on to it. And yet here it is. And if we were to have a breach, this data would cost us money. It would be an impact. It would not be good. And so one of the ways we're using automation is to identify this stale data, reach out to the owners, reach out to legal and say, do we really still need to keep this? And if not, let's get it on the transition schedule to get it out of our systems. And then finally, I think the other part that's really important is we're automating who is accessing what information. For example, did somebody share a file or a drive to the entire organization when they really maybe should have only shared it with 1 or 2 people? They just clicked on the default and the default was not a good choice. Here we go. Our automation allows us to find that quickly. Here again, if it's to the entire organization and we detect it might be sensitive, block it and notify the SOC. Let's get in touch with the user. If it's maybe not sensitive, we're still going to flag it and we're still going to get in touch to the user. Hey, did you really intend for this to be, consumed for the entire organization? And so we've really been able to minimize that exposure window, yet still be able to make sure the business can get the job done.
Felipe, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, certainly. And, I think Stephen did a great job touching on a lot of different aspects of how we can increase the resilience for systems. And while an agency does that, they're also increasing resilience into something that's near and dear to all of us, the humans that are involved, right? So, as they learn more about their systems, as they learn more about, the resilience of the systems, they become more resilient, right? Capabilities like a SOAR platform can tell you the money, the man hours you're saving by leveraging automation playbooks, the playbooks that it leveraged in response to certain events. And a good SOAR anyway would do that for an organization. And what that allows organizations to do is then make better business decisions that strategically in the long run help the systems run better, become more resilient, such as acquiring more WAN paths, acquiring an SD-WAN to help you out with that, in terms of where are you consuming data, where is it costing you, where are you getting the bang for your buck? And all of these really help. And I think it's really important that we realize resilience is something that an organization needs to look at as a whole. It's not just how did the SOAR respond and your IPS respond to a certain event. It's how did the humans respond? How did they realize or activate the processes that were involved with incident response? How did they engage stakeholders? Did they do it in a timely fashion? Did we get everyone involved that we needed to in regards to an event? and all the data and implications that were around that. And so that's really important. And so, I'll just leave it there. I think it's really important that we identify or define resilience for organization, even if we're calling it cyber resilience. It's not just post-breach, it's pre-breach, it's not just systems, it's humans, it's our business, it's process, it's our mission, and we look at it holistically. And I think we all can say, thankfully, Department of Ed is doing that, right? If you heard Stephen's answer. So it's great to really hear that.
Well, Stephen Hernandez and Felipe Fernandez, thank you so much for joining us here and talking about some of the things that you're seeing in helping agencies better control their security posture using automation and modernized capabilities.
Thank you, Wyatt.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.